see during those critical months. Mr. Weiland, take a look at Exhibit 47, would you?
Sure.
This is an email dated March 2nd, 2012. It was sent to you by one of the quantitative analysts at the bank, Mr. Krug, talking about CIO CRM results. Now, CRM stands for Comprehensive Risk Measurement. The OCC now requires all national banks to use this risk measure to calculate how much money could be lost in a year in a worst-case scenario. It wasn't a requirement in 2012, but it was about to become a requirement. And in anticipation of that, when this email was written, J.P. Morgan had already begun requiring its offices to start calculating their comprehensive risk measurement. So that was in part because the OCC was also going to, and now does, require banks to use their CRM results to calculate their capital requirements. In other words, how much money has to come from shareholders and retained earnings. Now, Mr. Weiland, on March 2nd, you received this email, again, Exhibit 47, notifying you at the bottom of the first page that, quote, CRM numbers have increased significantly at the CIO. And you responded, quote, these results, if I understand them, suggest that there are scenarios where the CIO tranche book, another name for the synthetic credit portfolio, could lose $6 billion in 1 year. You then forwarded the email to Javier Martin Artajo in London, who's the head of credit trading, and you called the result garbage. You wrote, we got some CRM numbers. They look like garbage as far as I can tell, 2 to 3 times what we saw before. You and your colleagues in the CIO complained about the CRM analysis to the head of quantitative research for the whole bank, a man whose full name is Mr. Venkatakrishnan, known as Mr. Venkat. If you look at Exhibit 49, which includes an email dated March 7, at the bottom of the page from Mr. Venkat to all 3 of you and others, explaining that the CIO's portfolio had gotten $33 billion bigger in January and February, which is why the risk of losing its so much money also shot up. Now, here's what he wrote, which is at the bottom of that page on Exhibit 49. Based on our models, though, we believe the $3 billion increase in RWA, which was referenced to the CRM, is entirely explained by a $33 billion notional increase in short protection, long risk in your portfolio between January and February. Pete Weiland and your mid-office confirmed this $33 billion notional increase in long index risk. Mr. Weiland, since the SCP portfolio increased in size by about $33 billion in January and February, the SCP wasn't decreasing, as the CIO told the OCC on January 30th. It was increasing. Is that correct? And Ms. Drew has already indicated that. Do you agree with that? It was increasing?
Yes, they were purchasing long positions.
But the portfolio was also increasing. Is that correct?
Yes.
Mr. Weiland, the bank's quantitative experts said the portfolio's comprehensive risk measurement, or CRM number, shot up to $6 billion in large part because its portfolio shot up in size. I understand that you had questions about that explanation at the time. Do you now believe that the analysts had it right, especially since the portfolio actually did lose $6.2 billion in a year? You now acknowledge that they got it right?
Yes, I acknowledge that now, with all the information we have today, that was correct.
All right. And do you think it was a coincidence that the CRM predicted a $6 billion loss in a year in a worst-case scenario, and that that's what happened? Do you think that's a coincidence?
It's hard to believe that it's complete coincidence. I don't know the details of the scenarios that generated the number at the time, but it certainly agrees with the way things unfolded.
Senator McCain.